welcome to Samuel's Fortress. I'm your host Kirill, and today we're going to be doing another reaction video. This time we're going to be taking a look at a video entitled The Bulgarian Occupation of Yugoslavia During World War II by the channel History Hustle. Now, don't worry, this is not turning into a reaction channel. I will be getting back to my original content here very soon, but as I said in the previous video, I've had an extremely busy summer so far and have had very little time to work on new videos, new content, new projects, and whatnot. My schedule is finally clearing up, so I anticipate getting back into the regular routine of getting a new video out every 2 to 3 weeks here going forward. I have been working on a new project this whole time. It's just taken me a lot longer to get through than I originally anticipated, so don't worry, we're going to be getting back into the regular routine here shortly, but in the meantime, like I said, I'm going to do another reaction video. I recently discovered this channel entitled History Hustle, and the creator of that channel basically discusses lesser-known events that happened during the Second World War. He has playlists on Bulgaria, Macedonia, other nations, and I've been going through and watching the videos in the Macedonia playlist. So let's start with this one. We might get to reviewing the other videos, but I wanted to start off with this one in regard to a very controversial topic in Macedonian history, and that is the Second World War and the so-called Bulgarian occupation. So without further ado, let's jump in.
Bulgaria did not take part in the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia and the German invasion of Greece. However, did you know that Bulgaria did take part as an Axis power in the occupation of parts of Greece and parts of the now dismembered kingdom of Yugoslavia? This here will be the story about the Bulgarian occupation of parts of Yugoslavia. Keep watching. Hey, good to have you back on the channel. If you are new, my name is Stefan. I'm a Dutch history teacher and I like to cover history, preferably on location. I'm right now in Skopje, the capital of North Macedonia. If you find it interesting as well, consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. To understand why Bulgaria annexed a part of Yugoslavia in the first place, we need to look at Bulgaria's role in the early 20th century. The country was involved in 3 wars, the First and Second Balkan War and the First World War. During the First Balkan War, Bulgaria, Greece, Serbia and Montenegro teamed up against the Ottoman Empire and proclaimed victory. The Second Balkan War was a conflict which broke out when Bulgaria, dissatisfied with its share of the spoils of the First Balkan War, fought against Serbia, Romania, Greece, Montenegro and the Ottoman Empire.
Alright, so I'm going to stop it here. I'm always disappointed with the way that people frame the justification for the Second Balkan War. It's always framed like this. It's always Bulgaria was dissatisfied with the territorial spoils it gained and couldn't satisfy its appetite for more and more Balkan territories, so it launched a war against its former allies. And this completely ignores the fact that Bulgaria had entered into treaties prior to the start of the war regarding territorial divisions, namely with Serbia. Bulgaria and Serbia entered into agreements prior to the start of the First Balkan War regarding the territorial division of Northern Macedonia. At that time, around 1912, the vast majority of the population in Northern Macedonia was Bulgarian. There was a good chunk of Albanians, as there is today, in the northwestern portion of that territory, and the agreement between Serbia and Bulgaria was that Serbia would essentially be given the northwestern portion that was primarily ethnically Albanian, and Bulgaria would incorporate the remainder of Northern Macedonia, which was inhabited by ethnic Bulgarians, into the Kingdom of Bulgaria. Now, Serbia did not abide by the terms of that treaty, and in fact, it completely violated those terms by occupying almost the entirety of Northern Macedonia, aside from the region of Pirin, Macedonia, which remained with Bulgaria and remains with Bulgaria to this day. So when Bulgaria launched the Second Balkan War, it wasn't because it just wasn't satisfied with the territorial spoils that it had gained. It was trying to establish control over portions of the Balkans, namely Northern Macedonia, which were inhabited by ethnic Bulgarians, which were supposed to go to Bulgaria as per the treaty with Serbia, which again Serbia violated and took for itself. So that was one of the main reasons for Bulgaria's launch of the Second Balkan War. Now, in hindsight, that was not the wisest decision, especially when all the other Balkan nations ganged up on Bulgaria and invaded it at the same time, essentially causing Bulgaria to not only not gain additional territory, but it ended up losing territory in the Second Balkan War that it had gained in the First Balkan War. So, in hindsight, it was not a great idea to launch the Second Balkan War, but to act like it was not justified or there was no basis for it, or that it was simply, power hungry or territory hungry Bulgaria is disingenuous, at worst, misleading at best. So again, I'm always disappointed with the way the Second Balkan War is framed by a lot of people. I did do a whole video on the Balkan Wars, which I go into much more detail on that topic and discuss that treaty between Bulgaria and Serbia in much more detail. So check that out if you would like. But again, I think that this framing of the Second Balkan War is not exactly the best, to say the least.
Bulgaria lost. During the First World War, Bulgaria allied itself with the Central Powers. It once again led to defeat. Bulgaria joined the Axis powers early March 1941. In the following month, on the 6th of April, Germany invaded both Yugoslavia and Greece.
Okay, so again, I did a video on the Second World War. It's called Macedonia and the Second World War, which I detailed the reasons, I should say, for Bulgaria's joining of the Axis powers. And in that video, I demonstrated very clearly that Bulgaria did not initially want to join the Axis, nor did it want to enter the war at all on either side. It was Bulgaria's intention when the war started and to remain neutral. And in fact, for the first 2 years of the war, from 39 to 41, it did remain neutral. It wanted to go through the war pretty much like Spain did, which was, again, a neutral party that did not take part in the conflict. However, Germany, for reasons we're not going to get into in this video, which I did go over in that video, which I referenced previously, Germany needed to get to Greece. The British had landed in Greece, and Germany needed to launch what was known as Operation Marita, an invasion of Greece, and it needed to move its troops through the Balkans to get to Greece. And Bulgaria was one of the main routes that the Germans needed to utilize in order to get to the Greek territory. And Bulgaria was placed under immense pressure by the Germans to join the Axis and allow German troops to move through their territory. They were quite severely threatened by the Germans with occupation, with war, if they did not join the Axis powers. And under immense German pressure, Bulgaria ultimately gave up its neutrality and joined the Axis, but it did not really participate in the war beyond that, really. So that is the reason for Bulgaria's entrance into the war on the side of the Axis powers.
Both invasions I covered in the past. See description for the links on just that. Although Germany launched its invasions from Bulgaria, Bulgaria itself did not join the invasions.
Exactly.
Yet they did take part in the occupation of parts of the two countries. The Yugoslav region that was occupied by Bulgaria is the largest part of what is today the country of North Macedonia. A smaller part in the west came under Italian influence, and a part of Serbia. During the
And that part of Macedonia that fell under Italian influence, I mean, this was essentially what was supposed to be Serbia's during, or based on that treaty before the First Balkan War. So this annexed to Albania, Italian protectorate region, this was supposed to be what went to Serbia. The territory that was annexed here by Bulgaria in the Second World War is essentially what Bulgaria was supposed to get anyway as a result of the Balkan Wars, just to clear that up.
Macedonia, a smaller part in the west, came under Italian influence, and a part of Serbia. During the interwar years, the region was referred to as Vardar Banata or Vardar Banovina. Now, in literature, it's referred to as Vardar Macedonia or just Macedonia. Now, this here angers Greek people.
Oh, really?
Wow. I didn't know that. You're telling me now for the first time.
you must be aware that Macedonia is a much larger geographical region with areas in Bulgaria, Kosovo, Albania, but the bulk of Macedonia is located in Greece. Some Greek people argue that Macedonians cannot be Slavic people, so therefore Slavo-Macedonians or North Macedonians is simply a wrong name. I do refer to them as such in this video because what else do I have to call them? People with roots from probably Bulgaria, Serbia that pretend to be Macedonians. I mean, that's a whole mouthful. I use these words you see here. I hope you understand.
When the Macedonians will not understand. Oh man, let's go back here. North Macedonians, Slavo-Macedonians, Yugoslav Macedonians. Okay, well, Yugoslav Macedonians, that's completely outdated, and there's no more Yugoslavia. Slavo-Macedonians is not really a term anyone really uses anymore, to be honest. But North Macedonians is something that I think Macedonians, the Slavic people living in the Republic of North Macedonia, need to be worried about, because this is how I anticipate people going forward, people outside of Macedonia, people, internationally will start referring to the Macedonians as. I fear that they will be known as North Macedonians. Now, that is not technically proper under the Prespa agreement, which was signed a few years ago. Under that agreement between what is now North Macedonia and Greece, the Republic of North Macedonia and the Hellenic Republic, based on that agreement, the country is known as North Macedonia, but the people are still known as Macedonians. The problem with that is exactly the one that the host here outlines, and that is the fact that a lot of people in the West, in Europe, in America, simply don't like referring to the Slavic people of Macedonia as North Macedonians because they view the real Macedonians as the Greek Macedonians. They think the Greek people living in northern Greece, in the Greek region of Macedonia, what we call Aegean Macedonia, are the real Macedonians. And that is because to a lot of Westerners, the term Macedonia, Macedonians, stems from the ancient Hellenic kingdom of Macedonia, the kingdom led by Alexander the Great, the man who spread Hellenism around the world, the kingdom whose territory is now located in the country of Greece. That is Macedonia. As he said, a lot of people do not like the fact that people who are not Greek, who don't live on the territory that corresponds with the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, call themselves Macedonian.
I am obviously on the Greek side in that name conflict, and I based it upon just looking at where the ancient Macedonian kingdom was, and that's in modern day Greece. So I view it a bit heretical perhaps for the Macedonians to have taken that name, but I don't see it as a major issue. But for the record, I'm just on the Greek side there.
And so you're going to see these terms used in order to qualify the term Macedonian. I think, again, these two at the bottom are definitely outdated, but I do think the term North Macedonian will catch on, despite the fact that that's not technically proper. And most people don't care that it's technically proper. Someone in the West, like this Dutch guy, simply sees the country called North Macedonia. They're not the real Macedonians according to them, and therefore it's just simple to call them North Macedonians. They don't care what the Prespa agreement says. If someone calls you North Macedonian, you're not going to say, well, actually, under paragraph 7, subsection B3 of this agreement, we're supposed to be called Macedonians. They don't care. They just, you're not the real Macedonians according to most people, based on most people's perception of what Macedonia is. Now, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just, that's just my perception on things. That's what he's saying. And in fact, in my interaction with a lot of people here in the United States, that's how they view it as well. I mean, I've had numerous times where someone's asked me, after they hear my name, they'll ask me, what are you? Where are you from? And I'll say, I'm Macedonian. And they'll say, oh, you're Greek. And then I'll have to explain to them how I'm not Greek. And then you just see this confusion on their face, because to them, Macedonians are Greeks, and you're trying to explain to them how you're Macedonian but not Greek, and it doesn't really compute with them. Recently, I had a discussion with an acquaintance of mine who studied classical Greek history, classical Roman history. He's kind of mainly focused on antiquity. That's his field of study. And he was actually in Greece recently, kind of touring these historical sites in Crete and whatnot. And I had a brief discussion with him on the whole Macedonia dispute. And I asked him what he thought about that. And he kind of just laughed and said, the Macedonians are Greeks. I mean, he just kind of completely discounted the fact that the Slavic people of North Macedonia call themselves Macedonians, that they have anything to do with ancient Macedonia. To him, it was 100% crystal clear that the Greek Macedonians living in what we call Aegean Macedonia, those are the real Macedonians. They're the descendants of the ancient Macedonians. They have the right to the name Macedonia, so on and so forth. Again, I'm not saying I completely agree with that. I have numerous videos where I discuss the Macedonian question. That's really the basis for this channel. So if you want my opinion on it, just check out my other videos. But again, I know this is a bit of a digression, but I just thought it was funny how this guy pretty much saying what a lot of people in the West think, that, calling the Slavic Macedonians is not exactly proper, and that there must be some sort of qualifier, whether it's North, Slavo, or Yugoslav. And again, I think over the years, in the upcoming years and decades, you will see this term North Macedonian being used more and more as an ethnic label. And I think really this is just based on the unfortunate fact that the Macedonians, the Slavic Macedonians, the former Bulgarians of Macedonia, chose the term Macedonian to identify themselves with, when there's a group of people to their south which have, at the very least, an equal, if not a greater, claim to that name. But this was a long digression. This was a long tangent. Let's get back into the video.
When the Germans marched into the region, they were greeted as liberators by the local population. During the interwar years, policies of Serbianization were implemented, much to the dismay of the population. Administrative brutality.
Yeah, let's go back to this photo, because this is a very interesting photo. As you can see, this photo is actually from Skopje, 1941, upon the Axis powers entering the region. You see local Macedonian women, and you see a portrait of Boris III and Adolf Hitler. So obviously, this is a very controversial photograph, given the man here on the right. I don't think Tsar Boris III is a very controversial figure, other than the fact that he allied himself with the Axis. But again, there's very good reason why Bulgaria did that. But again, we have here a portrait of Adolf Hitler being paraded through the city of Skopje. And as the channel host stated here, the reason for this is because the Macedonians view the Bulgarians and the Germans as liberators due to years of being under brutal Serbian occupation from 1913, but specifically from 1918, 1919 going forward. During the interwar years between World War I and World War II, Serbia, technically the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, really brutalized the local population in Macedonia. Again, I do have a video on this. It's entitled Macedonia, or Interwar Macedonia, I think, something like that. I'll post a link to it down below. And in that video, I describe how there was a borderline genocidal, if not outright genocidal, policy by the Serbs through the Kingdom of Yugoslavia against the Bulgarian population in Macedonia, in which the Bulgarians were forced to change their names to Serbian names. They were referred to as Southern Serbs. They were forced to attend Serbian schools, learn the Serbian language. They were prohibited from speaking their own language. We saw beatings, rapes, executions, shutting down of churches, schools. I mean, you name it. I mean, really kind of a genocidal policy on behalf of the Serbs to assimilate the Bulgarian population into the Serbian population.
Но и србите не запалија селото, дедо.
И не само тоа, синко. Него тормозеа народот. И ги силуваа жените. Не ги подкупија војводите. И уште долго ќе горат овие села додека сме на оваа земја.
So what we see here is people who are frankly just happy that Belgrade's boot has been lifted off their neck, and they are celebrating that fact. And it is just the historical reality that these two men here, Boris III and Adolf Hitler, were the individuals who lifted Belgrade's boot off their neck. I mean, this should not be interpreted as the people in the photograph supporting fascism, National Socialism, Nazi ideology. They're not supporters of Adolf Hitler. They're not, fans of what's happening at Auschwitz. They're not supporters of General Plan Ost or Germany's plan for, Eastern Europe or the Slavs after the war. They're not really even aware of those facts. I mean, those are kind of post-war facts that came to light, after 45. At this point in time, this photograph that we're looking at, these are simply people who are happy that they are finally liberated from Serbian oppression, Serbian brutality. They are not, again, evil people who are fans of Nazism. I mean, you can misinterpret this photo that way and view these people as some sort of fanatical supporters of Adolf Hitler, but that's not what's happening here. These are simply people who are celebrating their liberation after almost 30 years of the most brutal treatment at the hands of the Serbs. And again, please watch my video on interwar Macedonia so you can get some sort of idea of what was going on at that time in Macedonia and why these people are happy that anyone, literally anyone, would liberate them from that reality, that 20, 30-year reality of basically genocidal behavior.
Much to the dismay of the population, administrative brutality, Serbian chauvinism, political corruption, and economic exploitation were more flagrant in Yugoslav Macedonia than in any other part of Yugoslavia. When the Germans arrived, pro-Bulgarian Yugoslav Macedonians raised banners with "One people, one Tsar, one kingdom." On April 19, 1941, the Bulgarian army entered the region, and they were very much welcomed as well. Without making any formal proclamation, it simply extended Bulgarian military, administrative, police, and judicial organization and legislation to these regions, though it did issue a number of specific laws and decrees applicable to them. Bulgarian legislation was simply extended in the newly taken territories. The Bulgarian government took over all the property that had formerly belonged to the Yugoslav state, except for the assets retained by the Germans. The Bulgarian Fifth Army took over the region. A force of about 40,000 was kept in the region. Early 1943, with partisan activity increasing, another division was brought in. For administrative purposes, the annexed area was divided into two districts, Skopje and Bitola.
Yeah, so just briefly here, 1943 is actually an important year. We see here that another Bulgarian division was sent in to deal with partisan activity, but not only partisan activity, there's also Chetnik activity, Chetniks being the pro-Yugoslav Serbian royalists. So in 1943, you see a rise in this pro-communist and pro-Serbian activity, and the Bulgarians are forced to send another division into Macedonia to kind of put down this rebel activity. Now, a lot of the stories from modern Macedonians that you hear regarding Bulgarian brutality during the Second World War is really what's happening in 1943 and this kind of heavy-handed Bulgarian crackdown on rebel activity. I mean, I've heard stories myself from my late grandfather, who was 8 years old at the time. He was born in 1935, and he told me that when he was 8 years old, which would have been 1943, Bulgarian soldiers kind of entered his village and were not, the most polite, you could say, to say the least. They were very rough with the people who they viewed as supporting or sympathizing the partisans and the Chetniks. I mean, these rebels were targeting Bulgarian military units. They were, rebels during World War II, which were targeting the Bulgarian army, and therefore the Bulgarian army responded by, cracking down pretty heavily on these elements, and there were, let's call them casualties of war, innocent people which got caught up in the hunt for rebels in Macedonia. I had family members who were kind of caught up in that. I'm not excusing every single thing the Bulgarians did. I'm not a Bulgarian apologist. I'm not defending everything Bulgaria did, but everything has its context in which it occurred in. And in 1943, when a lot of these stories about Bulgarian brutality, when we're talking about that, we have to understand the context in which it occurred, and that context is Bulgaria cracking down on rebel elements, not that the Bulgarians are simply coming in and terrorizing the Macedonian population arbitrarily, the way it's often portrayed by a lot of Macedonians, which doesn't even make sense, because to the Bulgarians, the Macedonian population is Bulgarian. I mean, they're ethnically Bulgarians, so why would the Bulgarian military just be terrorizing random Bulgarian civilians? That does not make any sense. The history is very clear on that. In 1943, Bulgaria went in and tried to clean up rebel activity. That's what occurred in 43.
Each under a district director. The police too were territorially organized, though police chiefs were independent of administrative directors. The annexed areas of Kosovo and southeast Serbia, which the Bulgarians claimed were populated by Morava Valley Bulgarians, were attached to other administrative districts and put under other Bulgarian troops, but apart of that, the same policies were applied in these regions. After initial joy, there was disappointment. See, Serbian officials that run things here in interwar Yugoslavia, they were simply replaced by Bulgarian officials, which often were not the best ones. During the interwar period, the people here were told, "You are Serbs." Now they were told, "You are Bulgarians." From Sofia, everything was...
This is such nonsense. I mean, let's listen to that again.
They were simply replaced by Bulgarian officials, which often were not the best ones. During the interwar period, the people here were told, "You are Serbs." Now they were told, "You are Bulgarians."
That is such bullshit. I mean, I've watched this guy's other videos, and I know that he knows enough history to know what he's saying is nonsense. I mean, this is such a disingenuous comparison to compare the Serbian occupation during the interwar period to the Bulgarian occupation, quote-unquote occupation during the Second World War, is so disingenuous. It actually boggles my mind that this guy would make that comparison. The fact of the matter is that for the 100 years prior to the Second World War, the people of Macedonia, the Slavic population in Macedonia, is unquestionably Bulgarian. During the 19th century, we see ample evidence that the Macedonian population is fighting for the establishment of a Bulgarian Orthodox Church, the Bulgarian Exarchate, on its territory. This is prior to the formation of any formal Bulgarian church or even a Bulgarian state. Even in the absence of these Bulgarian institutions, the people in Macedonia are fighting for a Bulgarian church. By the end of the 19th century, we have the formation of the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, a Bulgarian revolutionary organization dedicated to the liberation of Macedonia. In the constitution of that organization, it says that the only people who are allowed to be members of that organization are members of the Bulgarian Exarchate, which are ethnic Bulgarians. The first president of that organization, Hristo Tatarchev, in his own memoirs states that he is a Bulgarian. Goce Delchev, probably the most famous member of that organization, writes in his own letters, which we have gone over in this video, that he and the other members are Bulgarians. During the First Balkan War, Second Balkan War, First World War, Macedonians en masse fight for the Bulgarian army, not only in Macedonia, but even in Thrace, in Dobruja. I just did a recent video on Colonel Boris Drangov, who is a native Macedonian from Skopje, who was one of the fiercest fighters of the Bulgarian army during the First World War. I mean, even if you look at the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization during the interwar period, is unquestionably Bulgarian. From the first President Hristo Tatarchev to the last president, Ivan Mikhailov, all the members of the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization are Bulgarians. To say that the Bulgarians during World War II tried to Bulgarize these people is so absurd. It boggles my mind that he's even making this argument. I mean, it's so stupid. Clearly, the Serbs tried to Serbianize the population. That is undisputed by anyone. I mean, other than Serbs who think that the population has been Southern Serbian since the Middle Ages, and only they believe that. And not all Serbs believe that. I should be fair to the Serbs. Not all Serbs believe that. Serbian nationalists, Serbian chauvinists believe that, but to make this comparison is so stupid. I mean, there's no evidence that the people in Macedonia were anything other than Bulgarians prior to the Serbian occupation. There's so much evidence to suggest that they were Bulgarians that to think that the Bulgarian army had to tell them that they were Bulgarians in the Second World War is again absurd. But let's move on.
From Sofia, everything was decided, and the Bulgarians did make an effort to transform this region into a part of a greater Bulgaria. The Bulgarian government saw the region as rightfully Bulgarian.
Why wouldn't
However,
they?
instead of liberators, they acted like conquerors, harsh and rude to the local population. The Yugoslav Macedonians were treated as backward Bulgarians.
What?
The Bulgarians realized only a part of the population saw themselves as Bulgarian.
That's bullshit.
Education had to facilitate the process of Bulgarization. Local teachers deemed suitable were sent to Bulgaria for a year of study and indoctrination. The new curriculum in the North Macedonian schools strongly emphasized Bulgarian topics and discouraged the use of the Slavo-Macedonian language, which the Bulgarian authorities regarded, rightly or wrongly, as only a dialect of Bulgarian. A typical weekly schedule included 7 hours of Bulgarian, 3 hours of Bulgarian history, and 1 hour of Bulgarian church history.
I don't mean to harp on this, but this is so absurd. I mean, let's just use an example. Let me create an analogy for you. Let's say, so I'm sitting here in the United States, right? Let's imagine in the future that some foreign nation, let's call it China. China invades the United States. Let's say Chinese forces land on the west coast of the United States and occupy large portions of this country. Let's say they occupy everything up to the Rocky Mountains. From the Pacific to the Rocky Mountains is occupied by China. And for 20, 30 years, the Chinese launch a brutal occupation, a genocidal campaign against the Americans in which Americans' names are changed to Chinese names. They're forbidden to speak English. They're forced to learn and speak Chinese. Political leaders, American political leaders are executed. American schools are shut down. Christian churches are shut down. Everything Chinese is imposed on them, and the Chinese try to assimilate the Americans into the Chinese culture and state and all those things. Then let's say after 20, 30 years, the Americans finally muster enough strength to push the Chinese back, expel them from the United States, and liberate the Western United States. And at that point, they re-implement the English language, reestablish American schools, return the people's names back to the original, American Anglo names and whatnot. And let's say someone says, "Oh, look how brutally the American government is trying to Americanize this region. Look, they're doing the exact same thing that the Chinese did." How stupid would that argument be? These people were Americans. They were Americans to begin with before the Chinese, this hypothetical Chinese oppression. Anyone who would try to compare what the Chinese were doing in this scenario to the Americans after they went in there and pushed the Chinese out would be ridiculous. Obviously, those people were Americans before the Chinese invasion, the same way that the people in Macedonia were Bulgarian prior to the Serbian invasion and occupation. To say that the Bulgarians were trying to Bulgarize, were trying to do the same thing the Serbs were by 7 hours of Bulgarian, 3 hours of Bulgarian history, 1 hour of Bulgarian church history. That's in a week. I mean, I went to school here in the United States. I definitely took 7 hours of English language classes and 3 hours of American history within a week. I mean, this tries to paint the picture that the Bulgarians came and tried to brainwash them into being Bulgarians when they were Bulgarians to begin with prior to the Serbs going in there. I mean, this is such a disingenuous argument. And I know from watching this guy's videos that he knows better than to make these stupid arguments.
The Bulgarians did implement laws for tax relief and economic assistance. 800 new schools were established, and Skopje was presented with a library, a museum, a national theater, and a university.
The horror.
The Bulgarians also assumed control over the Orthodox churches in the area. In 1942,
The Bulgarians assumed control over the Orthodox churches. You mean those same Orthodox churches that the Macedonians spent decades fighting for in the 19th century to establish Bulgarian churches? In 1870, when there was a vote authorized by the Sultan, in which the Macedonians voted by almost a unanimous margin. Over 90% voted to create Bulgarian churches on their territory, within their cities, in their villages. Those churches, are those the churches we're talking about?
Bulgarian
Ridiculous.
citizenship was imposed on the people, and those who refused would be required to leave the country. Those who accepted Bulgarian citizenship were promised tax exemption. It did lead to the expulsion of Serbs and Montenegrins. And around...
Listen, I'm not advocating for the expulsion of anybody. That's obviously inhumane, but those Serbs and Montenegrins that were there, that were expelled, were colonists that were sent there by the Yugoslav regime during the interwar period. Again, I'm not supporting it. They should have just stayed there and been treated humanely. I'm not, arguing that they should have been mistreated the way that they mistreated the Macedonians. But we have to be clear here that those Serbs and Montenegrins who were in Macedonia were not indigenous. They were very recent arrivals. Many of the sources, even Western sources, refer to them as Serbian colonists because they were moved there during the interwar period to help with the Serbianization of that territory. Just to be clear on that.
26,000 left for German-occupied Serbia. Resistance occurred, and as a result of that, the Bulgarians applied draconic measures. People were rounded up, imprisoned, had to perform forced labor, or were deported to Bulgaria. A special type of Bulgarian counter unit was developed, but with little success. What happened to the Jews in this region? As you may know, Bulgaria did not hand over its Jewish population to the Germans.
Correct.
But this was unfortunately not the case for the Jews living in the occupied territories of Bulgaria. The Bulgarian government took care of the roundup and deportation of an estimated 7,000 Jews from Skopje and Bitola. Inside German occupation.
All right, so this is one of the more controversial aspects, and rightfully so, of Bulgaria's activities during the Second World War, namely the deportation of the Jews on the territory of Macedonia, on the territory that Bulgaria was administering their deportation to camps in the north. Now, one might ask why the Bulgarians would deport 7,000 Jews outside of Bulgaria, but not the 50,000 Jews inside Bulgaria. And that is because Bulgaria had no policy of its own regarding, anti-Semitism, the deportation of Jews, and whatnot. That was a German policy. I mean, it should be clear from anyone who has studied World War II history and knows a little bit about it, that was a German policy, and the Bulgarians had no such policy. Now, the reason why the Jews in the territories such as Macedonia were deported was because Bulgaria did not have ultimate control over that territory. Again, just to be clear on this, because this is often misunderstood or misrepresented, I should say, is that the Bulgarians were not the ultimate decision maker in northern Macedonia. The Germans were. That was ultimately German territory. The Bulgarians were middlemen in a sense. The Germans, due to the Bulgarians ultimately deciding to join the Axis power, not necessarily voluntarily, but due to that being the case, they were given certain rewards, let's say. One of those was the administration of territories that contained a majority Bulgarian population, such as northern Macedonia. But again, the Bulgarians were administrators. The Germans were the ultimate decision makers. The Germans were the ultimate authority on that territory. Hitler, not Boris III, was the ultimate boss of that region. So if the Germans say the Jews are getting deported, the Jews are getting deported. I mean, that just is what it is, despite what the Bulgarians might think about that fact. Now, in the Kingdom of Bulgaria, within Bulgaria's sovereign borders, where the Germans are not able to overrule the will of Boris III and the Bulgarian government, the Bulgarians did not deport the Jews because they had no such policy of doing so. In fact, we have a lot of evidence that suggests that the Bulgarians fought tooth and nail to prevent the deportation of Jews from their territory. If you don't believe me, if you think I'm just a Bulgarian apologist, Bulgarian propagandist, there's a video on YouTube entitled The Power of One. It's a lecture at the University of California by a Bulgarian Jew named Aaron Cohen. He is a man born in Plovdiv in 1929 who lived through these events, and he pretty much states the same thing, that he gives a lot of credit to Boris III and the Bulgarians for saving him, his family, the other Jews in Bulgaria, and standing up to the Germans. Here I have a book. It's entitled Beyond Hitler's Grasp: The Heroic Rescue of Bulgaria's Jews by Michael Bar-Zohar. And Michael Bar-Zohar is an Israeli-born writer of Bulgarian ancestry, a former member of the Israeli Knesset, and he lectures widely for the United Jewish Appeal Federation and teaches at Emory University. In fact, on the back of the book, there is a review by the former national director of the Anti-Defamation League, Abraham Foxman, who writes, Beyond Hitler's Grasp is not only a well-researched book by a noted historian, but a tribute to those responsible for robbing Hitler of an entire community of 50,000 Jews. So here we see the fact that a lot of Jews, a lot of Bulgarian Jews, are not only do they not blame the Bulgarians for engaging in the Holocaust, they give a lot of credit to Bulgarians for saving 50,000 Jews from deportation. So when Macedonians, and I don't mean to, when I say the term Macedonians, I'm kind of focusing on what we refer to as Macedonists, people who are almost pathologically anti-Bulgarian, who are always trying to find a reason to attack Bulgaria. You'll often hear them use this kind of cheap tactic of kind of misusing these historical events to smear the Bulgarians as genocidal, fascist, anti-Semitic people who engage in the Holocaust, this and that. But when you actually look at the Bulgarian Jews themselves, they celebrate Tsar Boris III and Bulgaria's role in the Second World War in saving Bulgaria's Jewish population.
Inside German-occupied Serbia, the Bulgarians did assist the Germans with maintaining order. Initially, Hitler envisioned their role to be small, but later that year, German leaders wanted the Bulgarians to police a large part of Serbia in order to move German occupying forces to the Eastern Front. They arranged Bulgarian troops to occupy about 40% of Serbia proper. They were put under German command. The principal task of the Bulgarian troops was to safeguard the railroads, main highways, and main industrial enterprises, mines, and supply centers. Administration was done by the collaborating Serbian state authorities, and political control was done by the Germans. As said, the Bulgarians in Serbia proper were under full German command. The area in which the Bulgarians served as occupation troops was expanded on two later occasions, January and July 1943, bringing them in control of 80% of Serbia proper, excluding the Banat. Relations between Bulgarian troops and the Serb population were strained, as many Serbs had not forgotten the Bulgarian occupation of World War I. In the closing days of the pro-Axis Bulgarian regime, late summer 1944, both Germans and Chetniks started to disarm Bulgarian forces. Other Bulgarian forces soon left. In September 1944, the Bulgarians switched sides.
I don't like the term switch sides. It makes it seem as if the same government who was allied with the Axis now switched over to the Allies, which is not the case. The government of Tsar Boris III, the government that was in place prior to September 1944, did not switch sides. It was overthrown. It was overthrown by Soviet-backed Bulgarian communists. There was a coup. The Tsarist, monarchist government was overthrown, and a new communist government, which obviously would have been allied with the Soviets and the Allies, took over. So again, when we say switch sides, it makes it seem as if the same people switched their backing from one side to the other. That's not what happened here. We have a completely different group of people, the Bulgarian communists, who take over, and obviously their allegiances have been different since the beginning of the war, and obviously that is why they allied themselves with the Allies. Just to make that clear, I don't like the term switch sides.
Now the Germans, they wanted to establish a pro-Nazi puppet state. Now that is a story for another episode. There is much more about the topic of North Macedonia during the Second World War. Feel free to add any information you have found in the comments below.
All right, so there you have it. That is my reaction, my response to the Bulgarian occupation of Macedonia during the Second World War. Obviously, there are certain narratives, positions put forward in that video that I took issue with, namely the false equivalency drawn between Serbia and Bulgaria in regard to the Macedonian question. I don't think that the host is anti-Bulgarian per se, but I do think that a lot of Western historians, including himself, try to appear unbiased, objective, neutral when it comes to the Macedonian question, and therefore they kind of put Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece into the same category in relation to Macedonia. And the problem with that is one of those things is not like the other, especially when it comes to northern Macedonia. When we talk about southern Macedonia, Aegean Macedonia, Greek Macedonia, I definitely think Greece has their own legitimate arguments there. Clearly, there is a Greek population in Macedonia that has been there for a very, very long time, and that is a completely different analysis in the south. But in the north, I don't think there's any equivalency that can be drawn between Serbia and Bulgaria. I think Serbia, for opportunistic, expansionist reasons, has imposed itself historically on the territory of northern Macedonia in a way that Bulgaria has not. Bulgaria, from the early Middle Ages going forward, has a legitimate presence in that region. And I think that attempting to, again, draw an equivalency between Serbia and Bulgaria in that regard is disingenuous. Now, with that being said, I'm not trying to come off as some sort of Bulgarian nationalist, Bulgarian apologist, just defending Bulgaria in all aspects, especially when it comes to the Second World War. There are certain things I definitely take issue with Bulgaria on when it comes to this time period. First of all, I think a lot of the Bulgarian response post-43 in regard to cracking down on partisan and Chetnik activity probably went overboard. Obviously, there are certain events like Vatasha, which are in a completely different category, which I think can be explained more by human psychopathic, sociopathic, antisocial behavior than a formal policy by Bulgaria. I mean, we can see this in every conflict throughout world history. I mean, if we just simply take a look at psychological statistics, we see that between 1% to 3% of humans exhibit psychopathic, sociopathic, antisocial behavior. And when we're dealing with tens of thousands of men during war with what is essentially a license to kill, you're going to see massacres. It just is what it is. Whether it's Vatasha, whether it's the My Lai massacre by Americans in Vietnam, whether it's, countless different massacres throughout history, individual soldiers who probably have psychopathic, antisocial personalities will take advantage of the situation, and it just, like I said, it is what it is. Now, the other issue I take with Bulgaria and its activities during the Second World War is the fact that Bulgaria attempted to incorporate Macedonia into Bulgaria, essentially creating a greater Bulgaria, instead of attempting to facilitate the creation of an independent Macedonian state and create independent Macedonian institutions. Now, there was a period of history in which incorporation of Macedonia into Bulgaria had its time and place, namely from 1878, the Treaty of Berlin, up until the end of the First World War. There were a lot of Macedonians who fought for the idea of a greater Bulgaria. However, after the First World War, during the interwar period, we see the attitude and the ideas in Macedonia shifting away from a greater Bulgaria and towards an independent Macedonian state. Not necessarily a state that is hostile towards Bulgaria, but an independent Macedonian state nevertheless. I think this is very clearly seen in even Ivan Mihailov's work, Macedonia, a Switzerland on the Balkans, which he advocates for an independent Macedonian state, which has room for all the constituent ethnic groups, that protects the rights of Bulgarians, Greeks, Albanians, Turks, Vlachs, and so forth. And I think that had Bulgaria, instead of going down the route of the outdated idea of incorporation and creation of a greater Bulgaria, had facilitated the creation of an independent Macedonian state, which is really what the Macedonians wanted by 1941, that the idea of Bulgaria in the minds of the modern Macedonians would have been much more positive than it really is today. Instead of being viewed as, fascist occupiers, they would have been viewed as, liberators who helped the Macedonians gain their independence. Now, I'm not saying that Bulgarians were fascist occupiers, but due to the fact that they attempted to create a greater Bulgaria, that fact was misused, misinterpreted, and by the Yugoslav partisans, by Tito, in order to frame the Bulgarians in that way. That framing would not have been possible had Bulgaria simply assisted Macedonia in the creation of an independent state, which again was really what the Macedonians wanted. I think in hindsight, had Bulgaria done that, the relations between Macedonia and Bulgaria would have been much different today than they are, even if Bulgaria did not succeed. If we would have looked back in history, we would have at least seen that the Bulgarians fought for Macedonian independence as opposed to the creation of a greater Bulgaria. So those are my thoughts on Bulgaria during the Second World War. This video has gone on long enough as it is. I'm sure this is a topic we'll come back to again in the future. But for now, this is where we'll wrap it up. As I said at the beginning of the video, I will be getting back to my regular schedule of a video every 2 to 3 weeks here going forward. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.